The airline industry has been hard hit during this pandemic, as we know, and according to CEO Dave Calhoun of Boeing, getting back to normal may take 3 to 5 years.
How grave is the threat to the airline industry?
Well, it is grave. There's no question about it, and apocalyptic does actually accurately describe the moment. As people begin to relive their lives, we expect that they will also get back to traveling. We believe we will return to a growth rate similar to the past, but it might take us 3 to 5 years to get there.
All right, what's the likelihood of that if passengers just don't feel safe? Major airlines now have mask requirements for all flight attendants and passengers to enter the plane. But if a passenger takes off the mask while on the plane, airline employees do not have the authority to force them to put it back on. There are also no government rules for social distancing on flights, leaving each airline to determine its own policy. There was outrage last week after pictures showed what passengers called relaxed social distancing policies on United, Delta, and American Airlines. But because there's no guidelines from the administration, flying has become a health hazard, something our next guest is working hard to change. At least 7 flight attendants have died from the virus, while more than 250 within the Association of Flight Attendants have tested positive. There are many more who are not members of the association who have also tested positive. Joining me now is the president of that association, Sara Nelson. She's also now a co-chair of the Biden-Sanders Economic Task Force. Sara, thank you for joining us. You and I have spoken several times over the last few months about larger economic issues having to do with workers and the relief plans, but I want to speak specifically about airline workers right now. What we have seen, the images of passengers not wearing masks and passengers crammed together on flights, endangers passengers and flight crews. What do we do about this?
This is a huge problem, and this has to come from a coordinated response from the government. The truth is that air travel is way down, and we need our airlines, and we're continuing that essential service. But air travel is down to about 10% of what it was before, and what that's going to do is create full aircraft. So during this time when we have this federal funding, we were always supposed to be putting in place safety policies that would help to regain the confidence of the traveling public and be able to lift our economy again. We are right in the middle of the problem right now. And what we did, I want to remind people, Ali, that what we did was we got federal funding that said that the airlines cannot lay off anyone before September 30th. But what the GOP Senate members did in the process of writing that bill was they decreased the amount that is needed to get that done. And then further, Secretary Mnuchin further degraded that amount of money. So we've got incredible financial strains here that are colliding with making good safety decisions.
Let's talk about what the Boeing CEO, Calhoun, said, that one airline, one American airline, may go bankrupt. Airlines are sometimes in tenuous situations. Where do the protections come in for flight attendants if an airline goes bankrupt?
There are no protections for flight attendants or consumers in bankruptcy. And what Mr. Calhoun said was incredibly callous, as those of us are out here trying to make this work for ourselves and for the American public. But we have to realize that this is a crisis that we have not seen during the entire history of the aviation industry. And the other thing that we did through this federal funding was we made sure there can no longer be any stock buybacks. A lot of people talk about those airlines shouldn't have been pumping money into stock buybacks. But let's talk about the reality. In order to fix a problem, you have to define it. And the fact of the matter is that coming out of the bankruptcies after 9/11 and then the mergers, the airlines had to build confidence in investors. So people like Warren Buffett invested again in the airlines when they said, we're going to give you all these stock buybacks. It is the system. It's not just the airlines. But I'll tell you something else. As soon as we passed that legislation, Warren Buffett dumped all of his airline stock. That is a completely unpatriotic thing to do. And it shows very well that the system that we have in place right now is not set up to make good business decisions. It is not set up for flight attendants or other workers and for consumers. Because if an airline goes bankrupt, what's going to happen is there's going to be a bigger squeeze on the airline employees. There's going to be a bigger squeeze on the consumers. All the things people don't like, those seats close together, the fees, the conditions on board the aircraft, that is all due to bankruptcies and consolidation of the industry. So we are fighting hard to make sure that that doesn't happen, because it's not the way to protect the industry that we all need.
The idea of that money that went to the airlines to keep as much staff as possible on payroll until September 30th was a very good one, and one that hadn't been tried as much in America in the past. It's much more, as you and I have discussed, something that Europeans do. But that was to go until September 30th. Even the part of that works until September 30th, what we're realizing is that we will not be anywhere near a new normal by September 30th. So what needs to happen? Does that need to be extended?
That is going to have to be extended, because as you saw and as you reported today on Twitter, Ali, United Airlines is saying they only need 3,000 of 25,000 flight attendants for June. That should help people understand the real gravity of this situation. But what we saw in the HEROES Act was funding for corporations extended through December 31st. So there's already a recognition that this is going on longer than expected, and we're going to have continued protections for workers. What we're very hopeful about is that they will actually take the airline plan, where that federal money is targeted right at frontline workers. You tell the corporations exactly how to spend the money, and you put restrictions on them that they cannot lay anyone off. We've got to reverse those unemployment numbers and stop them. And frankly, when we talk to flight attendants about this and the plan that we put forward, we recognize that in a good economy, flight attendants need other industries to have those same protections, because we need people to be able to buy tickets on the other side of this. So we've got to put safety measures in place. We need the government working on this right now. There's no way to properly socially distance on an aircraft. So we need a task force together with the healthcare professionals and all the people on the front lines, putting together a plan that can keep people safe, regain confidence, and on the other side of this struggle, with the coronavirus, we can invite people back to air travel with confidence and restart our economy.
Sara, good to have you here. Thank you for joining me again. Sara Nelson is the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. She's a co-chair of the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force on the economy.